Welcome. Today we're going to talk about some basic legal principles in our justice system. The first one is that in our country, we don't put someone in prison unless we actually have the evidence to prove they committed a crime. This is very important. There were historically totalitarian governments before the Enlightenment. People with absolute power very often will abuse that power by putting political opponents in jail, throwing people in prison, without any real evidence that those folks have done anything wrong. They don't like you, they have a grudge against you, you go into prison. So we have this basic principle. It's protected in the Constitution. It's what we call the due process rights and the right to habeas corpus. And basically, if you're going to be accused of a crime, here you have a police officer accusing a person, the citizen, the person being accused, has a right to demand that that case be proven in a court of law. That means a few things. First of all, the police have to have evidence. We presume that people are innocent until they are actually shown with the evidence to be guilty of a crime. That's why somebody doesn't actually have to sit in prison until their trial has taken place. And there are some rules about that, some exceptions. If there's enough evidence, the judge might order the person to stay in prison while their trial is going on. But sometimes people can be released until their trial. Evidence would have to be presented by the police department and by the prosecution in a case. It could involve witnesses who either saw or heard something or knew something about the alleged crime. Fingerprints and DNA evidence are very important, especially more and more cases are being decided with DNA evidence today. Here you have a gun, so having the actual weapon, if a violent crime was committed, can be very important and helpful for the police department. So you can't just accuse someone and throw them in prison in this country. You have to actually be able to prove that they did it. And that brings up the next basic principle. Once you actually get to trial, of being have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. What that means is that the jury, and here you have a jury, there are 12 people on a jury, have to believe beyond any reasonable doubt that you are in fact guilty of the crime you're being accused of. Now, beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't mean there's no doubt at all. It doesn't mean it's impossible for someone else to have done the crime. But it basically means, based on the evidence that we've seen, it is not very likely that anybody else has done it. Not plausible. If any juror has a doubt, a serious doubt, that the person accused of the crime committed the crime, that juror is supposed to come back with a not guilty verdict. So you have the job of the prosecution to persuade all 12 jurors that the person is guilty. The defense attorney, however, only has to convince one that the person is not guilty. If you convince one person to come back with a not guilty vote, it's called a hung jury, and the prosecution would have to do the whole thing over. If all the jurors come back not guilty, then that would lead to what's called an acquittal. And that means that the person is not going to prison, they're totally free at that point. That's called acquitted. That's where we'll stop today, and we'll check back in. There's another quick video that you may want to watch today as well on different types of law. Thanks.